The 80 Years' War or Dutch War of Independence was a revolt of the 17 provinces against the political and religious hegemony of Philip II of Spain, the sovereign of the Habsburg Netherlands. After the initial stages, Philip II deployed his armies and regained control over most of the rebelling provinces. However, under the leadership of the exiled William the Silent, the northern provinces continued their resistance. They were eventually able to oust the Habsburg armies, and in 1581 they established the Republic of the Seven United Netherlands. The war continued in other areas, although the heartland of the Republic was no longer threatened. After a 12-year truce, hostilities broke out again around 1619, which can be said to coincide with the 30 Years' War. An end was reached in 1648 with the Peace of Munster, when the Dutch Republic was recognized as an independent country. Causes of the war. In the decades preceding the war, the Dutch had become increasingly discontented with Habsburg rule. A major cause of this discontent was the heavy level of taxation imposed on the population, while support and guidance from the government was hampered by the size of the Habsburg Empire. At that time, the 17 provinces were known in the empire as de landen van Herwaartsover and in French as les pays de par décor, those lands around there. In practice, this meant that the Dutch provinces were being continually criticized for acting without permission from the throne, while it was impractical for them to try to gain permission for actions, as requests sent to the throne would take at least 4 weeks for a response to return. This unrest was further amplified by the presence of Spanish troops brought in to oversee order. Spain also attempted a policy of strict religious uniformity for the Catholic Church within its domains, and enforced it with the Inquisition. The Reformation meanwhile produced a number of Protestant denominations, which gained followers in the 17 provinces. These included the Lutheran movement of Martin Luther, the Anabaptist movement of the Dutch reformer Menno Simons, and the Reformed teachings of John Calvin. This growth would lead to the 1566 Beeldenstorm, the iconoclastic fury of which had seen many churches in Northern Europe stripped of their Catholic statuary and religious decoration. Prelude. In October 1555, Emperor Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire began the gradual abdication of his several crowns. His son Philip II took over as sovereign of the Habsburg Netherlands, which at the time was a personal union of 17 provinces with little in common beyond their sovereign and a constitutional framework. This framework, assembled during the preceding reigns of Burgundian and Habsburg rulers, divided power between city governments, local nobility, provincial states, royal stadtholders, the States General of the Netherlands, and the central government assisted by 3 councils: the Council of State, the Privy Council and the Council of Finances. The balance of power was heavily weighted toward the local and regional governments. Philip did not govern in person but appointed Emmanuel Philibert, Duke of Savoy, as Governor-General to lead the central government. In 1559 he appointed his half-sister Margaret of Parma as the first regent, who governed in close cooperation with Netherlandish nobles like William, Prince of Orange, Philip de Montmorency, Count of Horn, and La Morale, Count of Egmont. Philip introduced a number of councillors in the Council of State, foremost among these Antoine Perrenot de Granville, a French-born cardinal who gained considerable influence in the council, much to the chagrin of the Dutch council members. When Philip left for Spain in 1559, political tension was increased by religious policies. Not having the liberal-mindedness of his father Charles V, Philip was a fervent enemy of the Protestant movements of Martin Luther, John Calvin, and the Anabaptists. Charles had outlawed heresy in special placards that made it a capital offense to be prosecuted by a Netherlandish version of the Inquisition, leading to the executions of over 1,300 people between 1523 and 1566. Towards the end of Charles's reign, enforcement had reportedly become lax. Philip, however, insisted on rigorous enforcement, which caused widespread unrest. To support and strengthen the attempts at counter-reformation, Philip launched a wholesale organizational reform of the Catholic Church in the Netherlands in 1559, which resulted in the inclusion of 14 dioceses instead of the old 3. The new hierarchy was to be headed by Granvelle as Archbishop of the new Archdiocese of Mechelen. The reform was especially unpopular with the old church hierarchy, as the new dioceses were to be financed by the transfer of a number of rich abbeys. Granvelle became the focus of the opposition against the new governmental structures, and the Dutch nobles under the leadership of Orange engineered his recall in 1564. After the recall of Granvelle, Orange persuaded Margaret and the council to ask for a moderation of the placards against heresy. Philip delayed his response, and in this interval the opposition to his religious policies gained more widespread support. Philip finally rejected the request for moderation in his letters from the Segovia woods of October 1565. In response, a group of members of the lesser nobility, among whom were Louis of Nassau, a younger brother of Orange, and the brothers John and Philip of St. Aldegonde, prepared a petition for Philip that sought the abolition of the Inquisition. This compromise of nobles was supported by about 400 nobles, both Catholic and Protestant, and was presented to Margaret on 5 April 1566. Impressed by the massive support for the compromise, she suspended the placards, awaiting Philip's final ruling. First 40 years. 12 years truce. The military upkeep and decreased trade had put both Spain and the Dutch Republic under financial strain. To alleviate conditions, a ceasefire was signed in Antwerp on 9 April 1609, marking the end of the Dutch revolt and the beginning of the 12 years truce. Although there was peace on an international level, political unrest took hold of Dutch domestic affairs. What started as a theological quarrel resulted in riots between remonstrants and counter-remonstrants. In general, regents would support the former and civilians the latter. Even the government got involved, with Lands advocate Johan van Oldenbarneveld taking the side of the remonstrants and Stadtholder Maurice of Nassau the other. In the end, the Synod of Dort condemned the remonstrants for heresy and excommunicated him from the national public church. Van Oldenbarneveld was sentenced to death, together with his ally Giles van Ledenburg, while 2 other remonstrant allies, Rombout Hogebeets and Hugo Grotius, received life imprisonment.